Good afternoon, Joshua. I,
Hi,
uh, I'm, I'm happy to talk to you.
glad to see you.
Uh, Give me an idea how music came into your life.
How music came into my life. Well, according to my parents, I came home from kindergarten one day and they said, "What did you do in school today?" And I said, "Well, we sang a song." And they said, "What was the song?" And they said, "I sat down at the piano and played it." And so they thought at that point they should give me piano lessons. So I started playing piano around age 5, and I have never stopped.
And when did you first write something?
I think I wrote a piece when I was 11. I still have it actually. It's called Waltz Number One, and it was a piano piece. And then I wrote a bunch of other piano pieces. And then I went to music camp at Interlochen and took a composing class. And then I wrote a woodwind quintet. And that was the first time I tried writing for a bunch of different instruments. And I thought that sounded really good. You know, just the combination of instruments together. I thought it was great to be able to write something that showed all those different colors. And then I got to college. That was at Yale, and took more composition there. And at some point around junior year, I think I thought it would be fun to start writing songs, you know, musical theater, cabaret type songs. And I did a bunch of those. And at the same time, I was also conducting musicals on campus and playing in the pit for musicals. And
What ones do you remember?
let's see, I think the first one I did freshman year, I was a cello player back then also. I played in the pit for a production of A Little Night Music. And, you know, it has that big cello solo,
Uh,
so which I had always loved because I heard that was one of the first albums I heard when I was a kid. And so I heard there was a production of Night Music, and I went to find the conductor and said, "Can I play the cello? Can I play cello in the pit?" And he said, "Sure," which was brave of him because he didn't audition me or anything. But so I got to do that, and I thought that was really exciting, you know, because that's such a great piece of music. That solo Henrik sings where he accompanies himself on the cello. It's called Later. Is what
it's
it's
known later, the three different songs.
right. It's now right. They weave Now, Soon, and Later all together, and that, of course, is a fantastic medley. And then after that, I played piano for a production of Godspell, and I just thought that was one of the most fun things ever. And then the next year I was musical director for a production of The Fantastics. And that was really great. And then the first time I actually conducted and stood up with a baton in my hand was a production of 1776.
So at this point, they weren't doing any original musicals?
They were, and I worked on a few of those also. Yeah, there were always lots of original musicals at Yale. And now I'm back there, and I actually teach in the music department. I teach a class called Composing for Musical Theater. And I've got tons of students who are all writing musicals, and some of them do senior projects, and they have full musicals produced. So there's lots of musical theater activity at Yale now.
And do you think some of these show prospects of future things like Shire and Malfi?
It's possible. I've had some really accomplished students, some students who really have tons of talent that I expect to go on and see great things from.
Was this position held by anyone else that we would recognize?
I mean, my teaching position?
Yes.
Actually, when I was a student, I took a songwriting class with Maury Yeston. You certainly recognize him.
Yes, yes.
Back then, though, it was just one course. Now it's a whole program. It's the Shen Musical Theater curriculum, which was endowed by Ted Shen. Ted Shen,
Yes.
Shen, his
A
wife.
very generous man.
Yes, exactly. So you know all about him and how he's been generous is the word. Actually, it's not an adequate word, but Ted has given lots of money to lots of.
Sound that, but he has a very limited number of people. And I said, would you consider somebody who's not Sondheim or a Gettle or? And he said, yes, he would.
Oh yeah, yeah. They've been supportive of me and my wife as a writing team. In fact, we had our Einstein's Dreams production off Broadway last season, and they were very generous contributors to that. Ted and Mary Jo have also underwritten a program at the Signature Theater in DC, where they give development money to young writers to develop projects and have them workshopped there. And they sponsored one of our shows there also. That didn't go on to have a full production, but we did have a 2-week workshop, which was, that's incredibly valuable to people who are trying to get a new musical off the ground.
Well, we're skipping quite a bit into the, we go back to your graduating from Yale. What were your aspirations?
I was a little unclear. I mean, I wasn't as focused as I might have been. There were a lot of things I wanted to do. I had also taken a class in film, composing for film. I went from Yale College to Yale Graduate School of Music. And when I was a graduate student, I took a class in composing for film. And I sort of thought, hey, this is maybe something I'd like to do. This is really fun and interesting. But then when it was time to leave graduate school, a friend of mine in New York who had graduated ahead of me said, hey, I need a roommate. Why don't you move to New York? Because up till that point, it was sort of a toss up between go to LA and write film scores or go to New York and try to do Broadway or classical music. And, my master's degree was in classical piano. So I was always sort of torn between, do you want to pursue classical or musical theater?
You were also interested in math.
I am very interested in math. I took a lot of math when I was a student, and the off-Broadway show that your label released was Vermont's Last Tango, which was about the Princeton mathematician who proved Fermat's last theorem, which was for many years the most famous unsolved problem in mathematics. For like 400 years, no one could prove Fermat's last theorem. And then in 1993, Andrew Wiles made worldwide news that he found a proof to this famously unsolvable problem. And so we wrote a musical about that. And a little bit.
Always with your wife, but again,
yes, my wife Joanne Lessner is my main collaborator, and she usually.
At what point did you meet her?
I met her at Yale.
I
met her when I was a first-year graduate student, and she was a freshman. And she was actually
pursuing. What was she pursuing?
She was a music major studying voice, but I was conducting one of the campus musicals, which was it was a production of Cabaret, directed by Tina Landau.
Uh-huh.
I did a few shows with her when I was a student. And Joanne wanted the part. Joanne was auditioning to be Sally Bowles, and somebody pointed me out to her and said, that guy is conducting the musical. And so she zeroed in on me, and we started chatting. And she didn't end up getting the part, but we did end up getting married.
How much after that incident?
That was, I guess it was about 6 years from the time we first met to the time we actually got married. We started dating a year later, and then we started having a relationship.
Did she move to New York about the same time that you did?
She moved to New York about a year after I did. She was at NEC, New England Conservatory, getting a master's in voice, and she decided it wasn't really for her. So, and I was already in New York, so she moved to New York, and we moved in together. And I guess it was probably 4 years after that we got married.
So what, in your early days, what things happened to you in New York?
My first music jobs, I guess, were subbing in Broadway pit orchestras. I had a few friends who had graduated ahead of me, Ted Sperling and Scott Frankel, both of who are pretty prominent names on the musical theater scene. But they were classmates of mine, but a little ahead. They got to New York earlier because I went to grad school. But they both were very helpful to me when they had Broadway pit jobs. They would let me sub for them on nights they couldn't be there. And so by subbing, I eventually started getting hired to play myself as a full-time pit member. My first regular job as a pit player was with Anything Goes, way back when they did that at Lincoln Center with Patti LuPone. That was 1987, I think.
How long were you in that?
That was a 2-year run. I was there pretty much from the beginning. I actually came in last minute as a. This is actually sort of interesting, I guess. I was a rehearsal pianist on Anything Goes. Actually, a substitute rehearsal pianist. The regular pianist was Don Rebick, and Don was going to be the pianist / associate conductor. But as they got into previews, he was having sort of a rough time of it. I remember I think he was having some difficulties in his personal life, and he eventually decided that he just was not gonna. He just didn't feel like he wanted to commit to the full run of a Broadway show.
He became a great jazz pianist, and
He
I
is a great
sold a CD of his.
Oh, did you really?
Is everything okay with him? I've not heard from him.
Yeah, I haven't been in touch with him in a long time, but I a few years after that, and he seemed fine. And so when he had to bail on Anything Goes, I was his standby, so I got the job, and I never wanted to get the job at someone else's expense, of course. And I think he definitely landed on his feet. And like I said, I've seen him a few times over the years, and he seems like he's doing just fine for himself. But there I was then pianist at Anything Goes, and about a year later, Eddie Strauss, who was the head conductor, left, and so I graduated to his job, and I was at that point I was musical director, and I think I was 24, and it was a little bit scary because I'd never had that kind of a job of that kind of professional stature before, but I sort of figured it out, I guess, and it was a great experience.
Do you have any Patti LuPone stories? I did The Baker's Wife with Patti.
I do have some Patti LuPone stories, but I think I'm gonna stay discreet on that topic for now and just say that it was exciting to work with somebody of her caliber, and she did make it challenging at times, and there was definitely some tension at times, but I'm not going to say anything bad about her.
Were you involved in the recording?
Oh yeah, I am. I'm playing piano. You can hear me playing piano on the cast recording.
No. How did that session go as a record producer? How was it?
It was pretty smooth. I remember thinking it was only a few weeks into the run when we did it, and I felt like I was still figuring things out in terms of my part as a pianist because I had jumped in for John Rebick at the last minute, as I was telling you. And I never really, at that point, I didn't really have complete ownership of, I didn't feel like it, I was doing it fine, and I, practiced my tail off. But then when it was time for the recording session, I remember thinking, wow, this is for posterity. I better make sure I get everything right.
Was this at RCA on 44th Street?
Yes, I think it was.
Yeah, I've used that studio a few times in the great shows that were recorded there, and then now it's an IRS office.
Oh, gee, that's too bad.
Yes.
The producer of that session was J. David Sachs.
Yes.
But I remember thinking, we do a take, and they'd say, all right, let's do one more. And then we do one more, and they'd say, all right, we're going to move on. I remember thinking, wow, really? That was it? Like, that's what everyone's going to be listening to for the rest of their lives? I hope that was all right. But, you learn to trust the booth, and if they say it was fine, then it was fine. And
well, you do need two takes because even the sharpest ears occasionally will miss something, and if it's the only take,
yeah, I guess so.
That could be a problem.
I also remember in those days, like an individual player might do something like if you're a sax player and you're playing something, you hit a wrong note, then sometimes I remember they would go, like deliberately bring the session to a halt. Like, I flubbed that, and I do not want that to be the take we use. I don't necessarily trust you to notice that in the booth, so I'm just going to stop the session.
Right.
Yeah, no one does that anymore because now it's all digital, of course, and you can cut and paste it all together.
Yes. But they literally had to cut. They had to cut this 2-inch tape and eliminate something. That was not an easy. Paul Goodman was actually the engineer who did my projects, Sugar Babies, and various other things, Onward Victoria.
Right. Yeah, in those days it was a more delicate operation.
Have you listened to the recording in recent time? Can you detect anything that isn't exactly the way it should have been?
On that one, I remember, I haven't heard it in decades, but I do remember, at the time I remember listening and thinking it came out pretty well. Wishing you could hear a little more piano, but
let's cut out those other instruments and have the piano.
Yeah. I'm also on the Wonderful Town cast recording. There's lots of piano on that. And when my daughter was tiny, we used to play that one, and she would always come in and say, "Daddy and the music, Daddy and the music." She was about 3. She was always excited to hear
So
that.
are you conducting and playing Wonderful Town also?
That recording was made when I was the pianist, and I graduated to conductor later on. But so on me, it's Rob Fisher conducting, but it's me playing piano. But I did end up conducting that for several months.
So what other pits were you either in or conducting?
Well, let's see. I was with Miss Saigon for 6 years. That was my longest term. And I was back and forth a lot on that, as back and forth from pianist to conductor.
Bob Billig, wasn't Bob Billig there?
Bob Billig did it for a long time. Eddie Robinson did it for a long time. After I left, I think it was Jay Alger. But I was associate conductor on that. And on that show, the associate / keyboard player regularly conducted twice a week. So even when I wasn't full-time conductor, I conducted a lot. I think I figured out I conducted like 800 performances. At least.
So, but you're starting to write days when you're not conducting?
Yes. Well, I've always done lots of composing, but these days I'm actually writing a book. I'm working on I think that's what you're referring to. I'm working on a book about Richard Maltby and David Shire as a songwriting team. I've always been big fans of both of them, and also had the good fortune to be friendly personally with both of them. And I just think they're really impressive. They're both really smart and really amazingly gifted, and really funny people. And, they're quite renowned, but I do think they are underrated, even though pretty much everyone knows who they are. I think I think they're one of the all-time great songwriting teams. And part of my motivation in writing the book is to sort of bring my feeling about that to a wider audience. And also, they're both really accomplished separately. They have a great track record as a.
Just individually, if you take away their collaborations, they still have nice careers.
Yes, exactly. Richard is really accomplished as a director. Richard is the only person who has ever. There are only 2 musicals. There are only 2 shows that have won Best Musical that are actually reviews, and not full-length book musicals. And those are Ain't Misbehavin' and Fosse. Those are the only 2 reviews that have won for Best Musical, won the Tony. And Richard Maltby directed both of them. Richard is the only director who has ever directed a Broadway review that has won a Best Musical for a Tony Award. And David is incredibly accomplished as a Hollywood film composer. He did the scores to the Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, which is really thrilling. He did Return to Oz, which sort of has a cult following. He did The Conversation, which was a Francis Ford Coppola movie. He's won Oscars for songs and for film scores. He scored one of my favorite movies, which is All the President's Men. He scored 2010, the sequel to 2001, and tons, literally, close to 100, over 100 film and TV episodes.
Did you meet either one of them when you were at Yale? Or Richard, obviously, you might have met at Miss Saigon. Is that?
Yeah, I did not meet them when I was a student, but I remember in doing summer stock one summer after my junior year. I was a pianist for summer stock at the Ivoryton Playhouse in Connecticut, and we did Starting Here, Starting Now, and I had never heard it or heard of them, and that sort of opened my eyes to what great songwriters they were. Maltby only came by like once or twice the whole time I was at Miss Saigon. I think he was sort of on to the next. But I met both of them in subsequent years, and have since worked on various projects with both of them. And in fact, we were supposed. I am the founder and conductor of an instrumental group called the Pit Stop Players, and we give concerts periodically. Not lately, obviously. But one of our projects was going to be to do a concert version of a show that Richard and David wrote called Take Flight, which has had various productions in this country and in the UK, but has never been on Broadway. But we were going to do it and tour it as a concert, with singers plus orchestra. And then, of course, that all fell through because of the pandemic. And I was really disappointed I wasn't going to get to work with them. And so as a result, I thought, you know what, I'm going to write a book. So that I've actually been working on that a lot lately.
Do you have a publisher?
I do not have a publisher yet, but I have leads on publishers. I'm getting to the point right now. Usually you have to show them a few chapters before anyone will sign on to it. And I'm about getting to the point. In fact, I would say I have a little more to finish in chapter 5, which I was going to do today. And once I have 5 chapters, I feel like that is enough to start auditioning it. So very soon I'm going to start making the rounds. But I have a lot of acquaintances who are well connected in the publishing industry, specifically as it relates to Broadway. So I think I'm not going to have too difficult a time with that.
So you're approaching it. Are you approaching the careers chronologically and individually, and then?
Yeah, I'm doing it mostly chronologically, but I'm also then it's going to alternate chapters, sort of the chronology of their careers, and I'm going to alternate those with analyses. Every other chapter is going to be an analysis of some Maltbyshire song. So I'm going to talk about a certain musical, and then I'll pull out a song from that musical, and then do sort of a deep dive into how does this song work. Make it so that it's accessible to people who don't necessarily read music or know music theory, but sort of go into a song in great detail. I think will be interesting. I'm hoping.
As I found when I moved to Connecticut, I went to New Haven to see musicals, and there was a record store, Cutler's. I don't know if that's still.
Oh yeah. All right, let me just.
That was me, I think.
Oh, that was you.
Yes. Okay. And I found Cyrano, and I found what's the Grand Tour, not the Jerry Herman yet to be written Grand Tour. It was actually they wanted to do Time of the Cuckoo, and Arthur Lawrence said, "No, I never heard of you. You're going to Yale. That's fine." But and then
oh, that's interesting.
Richard Rodgers, Stephen Sondheim eventually did it not terribly successfully.
No. I do remember Cutler Records quite fondly. I think they're still there. I haven't walked up that street lately.
In these years, I mean, what kind? Do you still have an LP collection?
I do. I still have all my LPs. I don't listen to them much because my record player is in terrible shape, but someday it might be worth getting another turntable because I've got lots of great stuff on LP.
I assume you have classical and other types of music.
Yeah, I would say it's about 85% classical. Maybe
CDs,
10.
How many CDs, ballpark figure, do you think you have?
Oh gosh, I've got shelves and shelves. Maybe 3,000.
Well, and again, the same proportion of shows to classical?
I'd say it's about 85% classical, 15% shows. That seems very classical heavy for someone whose profession, most of my professional life has taken place in the Broadway world. But I think just in terms of what I listen to in my spare time, it's mostly classical. Also, as a sideline, I review a lot of CDs. I write for Opera News and review tons of.
I contacted them, but they said, because they recorded some of my LPs in the 70s, and then that didn't seem to continue. And I talked while I was in the hospital. I talked to the owner. What's his name? He's a very colorful guy.
F. Paul Driscoll.
Yes.
You're talking about Opera News?
Yes.
Yeah, F. Paul is the editor-in-chief.
And he indicated I need to advertise in order to get my things reviewed. And I said, I'll think about that.
Really?
Huh. I don't think that most classical people or opera people are going to be interested in William Finn or I don't know.
Yeah, I think I think there's a lot of crossover these days. I think a lot of opera people like musicals, and a lot of musical theater people are more open to opera. I don't think there's as firm a divide as there used to be. And they will review a musical theater album every once in a while in Opera News. Not regularly, but I see them occasionally.
What?
I'm hoping to review Einstein's Dreams.
Okay.
But anyway, I get tons of CDs from them to review, and those, of course, are all classical. So I think that's why my CD collection is part of why it's so heavily weighted toward classical.
So a good percentage you didn't have to pay for.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
That's definitely one of the perks of the job.
So what are a couple of your favorites of things you had nothing to do with that you just didn't listen to, or even shows you've seen? How often do you go to musicals when we're not shut down?
Yeah, well, when I'm doing a show, obviously it's hard to get a night off to see a show, and of course there hasn't been anything to see in a while. But in terms of you talking about like all-time favorites or current favorites?
Yeah. Both.
Okay, well, all-time favorites, I would say Little Night Music is my single favorite show. I just think every song in it is sort of perfect. And that was actually one of the first shows I ever heard. We had a lot of show albums in our house when I was growing up because my dad owned the local radio station and he got a lot of that stuff for free. So he frequently brought home cast albums. And I remember hearing A Little Night Music when I was about 10 and thinking, wow, this is really good. Not realizing, of course, that not only is this really good, but this is probably one of the best musicals ever written. That sort of spoiled me in a way because very few shows actually meet that standard. But I somehow recognized it as something really special the first time I heard it, even at that.
Did you see the recent movie?
What's that?
Did you see the movie about it? Not recent, no, that
yeah.
That didn't work out so well. Actually, I was thinking Into the Woods, I thought was very nicely done as a movie.
Yeah, I liked the Into the Woods.
Elizabeth Taylor probably should not have been asked to do A Little Night Music.
No, that probably was not a great call. I mean, maybe they thought it would sell a lot of tickets. City of Angels is another one of my all-time faves. I just think it's really snazzy and really swinging, and the songs are really clever. Great lyrics. Great. That's David Zippel, and great score by Cy Coleman.
He is a new musical with Andrew Lloyd Webber. It's a new take on Cinderella. So again, when things are over and back to normal, they're going to be doing that in London. Have you been to London?
I have been to London a few times. I've had a couple shows done in London. I have a good relationship with the Royal Central School for Speech and Drama, which has a graduate program in musical theater performance, and they've done a few shows of mine there.
They do for Vermont there?
They talked about it, and they might still do it at one point. The first year they did a compilation show, which was like a review where they took a bunch of songs of mine from different shows and even a few standalone songs. And it wasn't just a review, but they managed to make a through line and give it a plot somehow, which was incredible because the shows were completely disparate and really had nothing to do with each other.
Marry Me a Little, where they took Sondheim songs. And
yeah, it was a little like that. Not to compare myself to Sondheim, but same sort of concept. But they wrote scenes for it, to sort of give it a through line, which I don't think Marry Me a Little had. Anyway, but that was called Love Is Not a Science. They called that show, which is actually the title of a song from Einstein's Dreams. But they did that, and I thought it was amazing, to just go over and have these people I didn't know put together this show of songs that were never meant to go together. I showed up a couple days before, and they had this whole show, and it was amazing. And then the next year, they commissioned us to do a full musical, and to create one from scratch. And so we were talking about this a little earlier. That turned out to be Stage Door, which we picked because the program had lots of women and not a lot of men. And Stage Door famously is a show with lots of women in the cast. And we got preliminary rights to do just this production. And so we worked on it for about 6 months, sent it off to Central in London, and they put it up. They did, again, a fantastic job. and those students just were really amazingly talented. But the Kaufman and Ferber estates, their representatives decided they didn't want it to go forward as a musical. They just said, we don't want Stage Door to be a musical after all. We said, well, gee, you really should have told us that at the beginning.
Well, I think they have tried other people, so they are very picky.
Yes.
They're waiting for Irving Berlin or Stephen Sondheim, or the combination of the two.
Yeah, I had heard that they were picky, but they did give us permission to try it out, and we thought we could win them over. But
who adapted the story for you?
Joanne, my wife, Joanne Lesner, who's my beloved wife and frequent collaborator.
Was the movie much different from the original play?
And they didn't. The heirs did not like the movie. That's the word.
So you just worked from the play, not?
Yeah, exactly. We worked from the play. In fact, we hewed very close to the play, and then we were told one of their complaints was, "You stuck too closely to the play." So, can't win for losing.
Need a tap dancing gorilla at some point. That would have pleased everybody. So back to so how does Vermont's Tango begin? The origins.
That actually started because I opened the Times book review one day, and there was a review of a book called Fermat's Last Theorem by Amir Axel. And I read the review of this, it was about the proving of the theorem, which we were discussing a little earlier. And the interesting thing was, Wiles proved the theorem, or he thought he proved it, and he submitted the proof and became really famous. And then somebody found a flaw in his proof. Like, your proof has a hole, sir. And it turned out this guy was right. The Wiles proof did have a hole in it, a logical flaw. So he had to go back and spend a whole nother year with the eyes of the world on him, trying to fix the flaw in his proof. And spoiler alert, he did fix the flaw in his proof, and the Wiles proof of Fermat's last theorem now stands as an important part of abstract number theory. But so that, Joanne describes it as boy gets proof, boy loses proof, boy gets proof, which is like classic format for a love story, except it's boy meets girl. But I read the review, and I told Joanne, this looks really interesting. Maybe, do you think there's a musical in this? Which anyone else would have said, are you crazy? How could there be a musical about abstract number theory? But she said, yeah, I think actually you're right. And she sort of drafted a scenario where we made Fermat himself, who was this 17th century mathematician, a character. Like, he's this ghost who haunts Andrew Wiles while he's trying to solve the proof. And we also bring back lots of dead mathematicians who, in our imagination, live in a sort of purgatory called the aftermath. And if you visit the aftermath, you find Pythagoras and Euclid and Newton and Gauss, and they're all characters, and they sing like as this not quite a barbershop quartet chorus, but they're sort of aiding and taunting Andrew Wiles as he seeks to find his proof.
This is a lighthearted approach to some of this.
Yes, exactly. The whole thing is lighthearted. It's trying to take a lighthearted approach to something that most people would find dense and off-putting. And I think we succeeded. The audiences responded really well. The CD sold, as far as these things go, I think for a couple weeks it was like #1 at some record store downtown that sold show albums. You would remember that probably better than I do.
I think the Uptown.
Footlight
I'm
record?
more familiar with that's the store to the website I took over. So again, it was my best store. But also the Uptown Tower had a weekly like top 10, and I was happy. When I deliver CDs or LPs, I would see, that I was not on charts other places, but nice to know there were maybe only Footlight and Uptown Tower.
Yeah, you did a really good job of getting that into the stores. I remember going to Tower and looking for the Fermat's Last Tango CD and seeing a couple copies, being very happy about that. So every once in a while I would buy one, and then I would go the next time and it had been replaced. So that was good to know.
there is a danger because this is early computer kind of thing. The computer would say, ship back that title because it's not sold any copies in 6 months. So you're probably ahead of the game by buying a copy.
Oh, good. I was preventing
Other people did not. Cabaret people, cabaret people tended to give away copies to everybody they knew, and that was their market for little known cabaret people. I mean,
right. That's another way to do it. Then the other CD of mine that you released was Bush is Bad. That was my off-Broadway political review that ran at the Triad for about 1.5 years, I think.
So tell me how that came into existence.
That came into existence because I despised George Bush, the younger. And when he was reelected in 2004, I thought, this is just really the most horrible thing that this guy was actually reelected. I thought, so what can I do to advocate my political point of view? Well, I can't really donate time because I'm really busy, and I can't really donate money because I don't have enough, but I can write songs. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a political review. I'm going to call it Bush is Bad. And we're going to do it at the Triad, where they make it pretty easy for you to self-produce your own show. So I raised $25,000 and wrote a bunch of satirical numbers.
And Kate Baldwin just happened to audition?
Well, no, I knew Kate because I was conducting Wonderful Town at the time, and she was in the cast, and we were friendly. I knew her before that even. I said, hey, you want to be in this? And she said, sure. And I was very friendly with Michael McCoy and Neil Mayer, both of who also ended up in my next show at the Triad, which was Mark Felt Superstar. We can talk about that in a minute if you want. And it was just going to be 3 performances of Bush is Bad.
But I saw it at York. When did the York Theater do it?
Right, we tried it out there. Jim Morgan, my good friend, mounted. We did sort of.
I asked you whether I could do a record of this, and you said, I am doing a record of this, and you could distribute it, which I thought was...
Oh, is that how we did it?
Yep.
Huh. Yeah, we recorded it live, which I thought was important because, a big part of it was the audience response. There's people...
You record a few performances and then...
Yeah, exactly, and splice them together. I thought it was important to have the live audience there.
That album sold very well because it was so topical.
Yeah, and for that one, I remember walking into Tower, and it was in 3 different places. It was with the show albums, and then it was with the just released rack, and then it was somewhere else. I can't remember, but I remember thinking, wow, this is great. This is like, you can't go anywhere in this store without seeing that recording. So that was exciting, but it's low-hanging fruit in a way to get people excited about Bush bashing on New York's Upper West Side.
Wasn't it done other places?
Yes.
Overseas?
It was not done overseas. There was an LA production. There was a Minneapolis production. And we did a couple runouts where we would do like 2 performances in a city. But the LA and Minneapolis versions were produced by other people. I just licensed the rights. But the 3 of us would go and, like, we did a run out to Charleston, South Carolina, where Democrats are definitely in the minority, but they are a quite vociferous minority. And when we walked on stage in Charleston, South Carolina, they were just so ecstatic that, here were some partisan Democrats doing a show for them. It was like the first and only time in my life I've felt like an actual rock star. When we walked out, they stood up and screamed. That's what it's like to take a left-leaning political review to Charleston, South Carolina.
Well, New York, did you get the New York Times and the
newspapers? Yeah, the Times gave us a really good review. That helped a lot. I think that's why we ran for so long. Variety magazine called us a sensation. So that was exciting. I still use that quote in my bio.
All places, was it done in cabaret spaces?
LA was an actual theater. And Minneapolis, I think, it was a black box theater. And Georgia or South Carolina, Charleston was a big theater.
1,000 or more seats?
Yeah, I think like 2,000. Big auditorium.
And there was a sufficient audience to,
Yeah, I think every Democrat in the state was there. It seemed like it.
okay.
Yeah, I don't think we could have sold another night, but we did sell out for one night.
So,
Yeah, it's easy. It's easy to sell tickets for a single event. This is one thing I've learned producing shows and producing my own shows and producing concerts with my group, the Pit Stop Players. It's very easy to get a lot of people to come to an event one night. It's very hard to sustain a run. That's the
Saturday night the good night versus Thursday or Friday.
Thursdays and Fridays are fine. Thursday, Friday, Saturday are fine. It's Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday where it's hard to get people to come see stuff. At least if you're not a big Broadway show with a huge ad budget.
In more recent times, you were involved with the Grinch.
Yes, I was the original musical director for the Grinch musical on Broadway. And in recent years, when it comes back, it goes to the theater at Madison Square Garden. That has a score by my good friends Mel Marvin and Tim Mason.
And it's also based on the Albert Haig Boris Karloff TV.
Well, it did take songs from the that famous.
That was, I think, maybe a half hour.
Yeah, I think so.
Wasn't Broadway length?
So the Broadway version, the Mel and Tim version, it does use "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch," which is the song everyone knows, and it uses the Fahu Forays quartet chorale number that the Who's sing. But the rest of the songs, which is like 14 other songs, are by Mel Marvin and Tim Mason. And, that's the vast majority of the show. So most of it is pretty original. Most of it is completely original in terms of the score. And there's a book, which is based on, of course, the famous Dr. Seuss book, but expands it so that the show's like an hour and 20 minutes long.
Who wrote the book?
Tim Mason. He wrote book and
okay.
Using some of the famous Dr. Seuss couplets, but also expanding it to make it
his own couplet. It's all couplets.
It is all rhyming couplets. Very cleverly
done. Easy. Did your wife say that wouldn't be terribly easy?
It is not easy. I asked him about that once, and he said, when you're doing that kind of thing, it makes you feel like you're just so fixated on making everything rhyme. It inhibits you socially because you feel like you can't say anything to anyone unless you speak in rhyming couplets. But I think he's recovered since then. But yeah, The Grinch has been a big success. We did a cast recording of that. And I did all the vocal arrangements and incidental music for that show. So
did that start in California?
It actually, yeah, it's been running a long time at the Old Globe in San Diego.
So it's the Christmas show at the Old Globe?
It actually originated as a children's theater adaptation, I think in Minneapolis. I should check with Tim on that, but I think it was a children's theater piece, not a musical. And then the Seuss estate, which had given it, given the rights, I think then Jack O'Brien went to them, and he was friendly with Audrey Geisel, who is Dr. Seuss's widow, or was Dr. Seuss's widow. And Jack, who ran the Old Globe at that time, said, "Hey, what if we adapted this as a musical?" And they gave the permission. And I'm a little hazy on some of the details because I wasn't involved at that early stage. But Tim Mason had written the play adaptation, and then Mel was brought in as the composer to adapt it as a musical for the Old Globe. It has been running at the Old Globe ever since. That was like maybe 2004 or 2005. It was first brought to New York in 2006 by Running Subway Productions. One of the producers at Running Subway, very confusingly, his name's Joshua Rosenbaum. And I think that's who you first contacted when you were trying to reach me. But Josh and I frequently get confused for each other. Not only that, we have the same middle name. We're both Joshua David Rosenbaum, and we both live on 93rd Street.
You're married to different people?
We're definitely married to different people. But it has caused great confusion throughout the entire run of The Grinch. But so he's producer Josh and I'm conductor Josh.
Was there any virtual Grinch this December?
I think the San Diego people did it as a radio broadcast.
Um,
Adapted it for radio. As you know, it was done in the UK last year as a touring production, and the UK producers developed it for TV, and that was broadcast by NBC last month. But we had
Matthew Morrison. Matthew Morrison became the Grinch.
yes, exactly. But they did that. I didn't do anything except well, I hope I lent the use of my vocal arrangements and incidental music, and I'm hoping I'll get a royalty check one of these days.
What was it? Did you watch it? You watched it on Channel 4?
I did.
Any idea what the ratings were?
I don't know what the ratings were.
I would think they would be well because
Yeah, I would think
people like Matthew Morrison, and it's a seasonal treat.
exactly. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people watched it. I found it disappointing that they spliced it up with so many commercials, which I guess you have to do to afford to be able to do it. But I just thought that made it. I mean, I know the show. I've conducted like 600 performances of it, and I could barely follow the plot just because there were so many commercials.
Is it now, when they did sitcoms or any kind of a show, they were restricted to not that many minutes of commercial. I now believe that there are no limits, and you could, in theory, have a song for 3 minutes and go to commercial. And
Yeah, that's pretty much what they did, which I thought was a shame. But the financial considerations, I'm sure, were enormous. But I just hope it got word out that we do have this new fully populated musical adaptation of it, and you should, if you're a regional theater producer, you should bring it to your town. There's a tour that's been going out for the last decade, I think. It hits like 6 cities every year, and then when I'd say every 2 years we bring it back to New York.
Wasn't Patrick Page the Grinch?
Patrick was the original Grinch. Patrick was fantastic. Patrick has that amazing deep bass voice that you can now hear on the Hadestown album. He had this freakishly low range, marvelous, I should say, fantastic low range when we did the Grinch. It seems like he's dropped a whole octave since then. Now he's just way off the normal charts of where most basses can even sing. And he his wonderful resonant bass voice on the Hadestown album.
Is the male voice easier to sustain as one gets a little older? Is the soprano?
I think maybe. I mean, it's hard to generalize. I think partly it's because men sing in a range that is close to their speaking voice, whereas women sing in a range that is much higher than their speaking voice. So I think that's the reason why you hear a lot about sopranos who've had to end their careers because their voice is just given out. You hear that less from men. I think that there might be some truth to that.
Are there any really difficult songs that you've written in terms of singing?
Well, being married to a soprano sort of keeps me honest in that regard. Like,
Do you think there are more soprano things because of your wife? If you were married to a mezzo,
well, the key is you have to keep it reasonable range-wise, whether it's a soprano or a mezzo. But the fact that Joanne is a soprano means I have more freedom, I think, actually. But you can't write something that lies up too high for too long. Plus, the male range, they're not really exactly an octave apart. It's something high for a man is going to seem higher for a woman. I think you can say in general, it's not exactly an octave transposition. So if I write something that I can sing pretty easily, if I have sort of a baritone / tenor range, that is going to be harder for a woman to sing when she tries it and sings it in her natural octave. So basically what I learned for Joanne is I can't just write stuff that I can sing and assume that it's instantly transferable for a female voice. You have to take into consideration what the actual female range is.
Have either one of you ever gone on in one of your shows?
Definitely not me. I have no performing ability. desire to be an actor or singer. But Joanne, often in early readings and workshops of our shows, has taken one of the female roles. An early show of ours that never got done, but was Tales of the Arabian Nights. It was an Arabian Nights adaptation, and the lead role, Scheherazade, we wrote for her, and she did that multiple times. And she sang, early on, she sang one of the roles in Einstein's Dreams for a long part of its development, but then for the production, turned it over to Tess Premack, who did a stunning job. You can hear her on the recording. Joanne was happy to turn it over to Tess because Tess was so fantastic. And also we wanted her to be the writer and sit out and make sure everything was going okay rather than being on stage. But yeah, she is often an important part in the development of our shows, and certainly trying out songs for us early on. I can write something and just go, here, sing this, and let's see what it sounds like. So it's, yeah, the fact that she sings is an important part of our collaboration, I would say, definitely.
I see the Music Man behind you. Is there a story?
Oh, sharp eyes. Yeah, well, I said I have no performing ability, and I don't, but no one told me that when I was a kid growing up. And so I was in a community theater production of The Music Man and played Winthrop, the little kid with the lisp. And that was actually a very formative experience. But then skip ahead a few decades, and I was actually the associate conductor for the last Broadway revival of The Music Man.
Rebecca Luker.
Yes, with Becca.
Must have been wonderful to hear her every night.
Oh yeah, glorious. I miss her. She was a good friend and an amazing talent. She passed away recently, as you may know, which was a very sad event for many people. But yes, it was that revival with her. I was associate conductor on that and conducted it a lot.
Were you on the cast album?
What's that?
Were you on the cast album?
I am not on that cast album because I joined it like 6 months into the run, I think. They'd already made the recording. But so that was a formative experience in my childhood, and also as an adult, it was great to be part of that production. So that's why that has sort of a special.
The other pictures, what's the thing to the right of it and a little higher?
Oh, that's someplace we visited. I can't remember. But right below that, you may notice that is a calendar shot. You may notice those are my two kids, Julian and Phoebe. You see who that fellow is next to them? You probably can't tell on the small screen. No, that's Joe Biden.
Wow.
My son is a software engineer at Facebook, and
perhaps they will help run the country.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. But a few years back, before he was running for president, Biden was there to have a meeting with a bunch of top Facebook executives, and he came out of the conference room, which Julian, my son, was actually not a part of. But Phoebe, my daughter, happened to be visiting Julian at work that day. And Biden walks out and Julian says, "Mr. Vice President, I'm a big fan of yours. Could we have a picture with you?" So Biden took a selfie. There it is on our calendar, and now he's president.
Well, it's just the natural progression.
Yes, exactly.
Have either one of them done anything musically?
Phoebe, my daughter, is a sophomore at the University of Miami Frost School of Music, and she is a double major in classical voice and contemporary songwriting. She sort of she writes indie pop style stuff. Actually, she's very versatile. She writes in a lot of different genres. But the Frost School at Miami was one of the few places we found where she could do both classical and popular songwriting. You know, she could sing classical voice and do. And
are classes going on there, or virtual, or what's happening?
Most of her classes are in person. There are a few that are remote, but she just went back for a second term, and you know they have masks and social distancing and you know, of course, all kinds of safety protocols in place. But she does a lot of in-class stuff. She even is in a chorus, and they wear masks and they stand 6 feet apart. But it's a functioning, really outstanding, actually, women's chorus. So they're able to do a lot of their stuff, which is great. But it's a really terrific program down there.
Did they all see the shows you conducted?
Yeah, they were all pretty good about coming to see my stuff. And Julian, my son, obviously is not in music professionally, but he's an avid amateur musician, and he's written a fair number of songs himself. When he was at Yale, he was the student arranger for the Yale marching band, and that was a really fun job for him. He did tons of band arrangements, and he's also a very good parody lyricist. He's really clever with words, and he has done some very funny stuff and some original stuff.
Perhaps
So
the whole family could put together a musical and each do what you're particularly adept at.
sorry, what's that?
There could be an all Rosenbaum comedy, and each could contribute. And
Yeah, well, we've actually talked about that, doing an all Rosenblum evening somewhere like Symphony Space, where I've given a lot of concerts with my group, the Pit Stop Players. But we thought we could easily fill up a program with my stuff, Phoebe's stuff, and Julian's, and we might do that when live events are possible again, an all Rosenblum concert. And Joanne doesn't, but she could sing, of course.
were you at the Thalia or the actual symphony?
I've done concerts in both spaces. Something like this would probably be in the Thalia. A little easier to fill the house.
So now, are there any musicals you were involved in that we haven't covered in terms of conducting?
Oh yeah, a bunch. I was for a while I was music director of the original Falsettos on Broadway. It's funny, I'm starting to feel old because all the shows I did when I was first here as a young-ish professional have now all been revived. First time I played in the Pit was as a sub on the original Drood. That's now had a revival. Falsettos has had a revival. Anything Goes has had a revival. Saigon has had a revival. So those have all come back. And then they never want to hire you the second time around. They think, oh, well, the people who were with the original, they're going to have all these preconceived notions of how it has to go. And we want to do our own version. It's going to be completely new and different. So we don't want them. To which I say, I can do it a different way if you want. I don't care. But, of course, that's up to whoever's in charge.
Do you see conducting Broadway in the future? Would you like to continue?
Oh, yeah, sure. Conducting Broadway is a blast. I mean, the conducting part is a blast. Dealing with the headaches backstage is not such a blast. But when you're the conductor, you're sort of an easy target. And you can never find a tempo that makes everybody happy. The dancers want it slower, and the orchestra pit wants it faster. Everybody wants to get out of the building early, so they want you to do it fast. But if the writers or the original director come back, they see the show and say, this is so fast. This is terrible. You've got to slow everything way down. So you slow everything way down, and then everybody in the building hates you because it's too slow. And, so this is just what you're dealing with week after week.
It's like people complaining about the heat. Somebody says it's too hot. They say, no, it's a little cool, if anything. And,
There's a lot like that. I'm told, I've never done a show that's all on click track, where the tempos are, you're listening to a click in your head, so the tempos are exactly the same every night. Big dance shows are sometimes like that. But I'm told that even with a click, people come off stage and say, that was so fast. How can you do it that fast? You say, hey, that was quarter note equals 92, just like it was last night. No, it was much faster. So tempo is a very subjective thing. Depends on what mood you're in and what you had for dinner. But when you're the conductor, you're the lightning rod for all that stuff.
Which of the shows you conducted were the most difficult to play or conduct?
Wonderful Town had a very challenging piano part with lots of tricky solos, lots of exposed stuff. But it was great fun. That's Leonard Bernstein, of course. And, once you've got it and it's not kind of a sort of nerve-wracking experience, it's lots of fun. Curtains. I was in the Pit at Curtains for about 2 months covering somebody's leave of absence. That was Kander and Ebb. And for some reason, every song started with a piano solo. Like you have to play the whole first 2 pages by yourself, and then finally the orchestra comes in. That was a little scary. The most challenging show I ever conducted was called The Transposed Heads. Almost nobody remembers this, but this has
English, an English thing?
What's that?
Didn't this come from England?
No, it came from Elliot Goldenthal and Julie Taymor.
Oh, yes, yes.
Julie Taymor, the renowned director, of course. Elliot Goldenthal, her, I don't think they're married, but they've been together for,
Team.
yeah, forever. Anyway, Elliot's a genius. And the score to the Transposed Heads, which is an adaptation of a novella by Thomas Mann, was incredibly complex, really challenging, tons of mixed meters, different key signature in every bar, hard to sing, hard to play. It was one of the first jobs I had when I was a young conductor and just moved to New York. And again, it was an emergency replacement kind of thing. Or they had a 6-piece band without a conductor, the idea that they could just sort of play it like chamber music, but it wasn't really hanging together. So someone brought me in and said, here, this guy can conduct, mixed meters, or somebody thought I could. So all of a sudden I was the conductor, and that was very challenging, very exciting, very rewarding. I wish someone would bring that show back someday, because it was just one of the coolest things ever.
Where was this done?
This was done first at Prince Music Theater in Philadelphia, and then it was done at the Mitzi Newhouse at Lincoln Center. I've never seen anything like it before or since, and I really hope we get to hear it or hear from them.
Is there anybody in it that we would recognize?
Oh gosh, it wasn't really star driven, not at all. But it was people who could do this really difficult, challenging stuff. Plus, there was a lot of Indian style folk dancing, and there was a woman who was an expert in that kind of thing.
Did the New York Times look in the favor of?
Yeah, there was a Times review, but he didn't really get it, and he was kind of dismissive. I think it was Mel Gassow. It just really did not appreciate how
somebody younger and maybe hip.
Yeah, exactly. We needed somebody young and hip to review that and really appreciate it. There was talk over the years that they would make a movie out of it. Julie had a movie career for a while. That never materialized. But in terms of sheer technical difficulty, I remember having to go yada da 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 dum bum 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 yeah da 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 dum bum bum da 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 da. Some of the intricate patterns of the dancing were just.
But is there a recording of this?
We did do a recording. It was very fly by night. We just went into a studio. I think I have a cassette of it somewhere, but I don't think it was ever commercially released. I think it was just for them to use as a demo.
Okay.
Thanks for reminding me. I'd sort of forgotten about that and not thought about it in a long, long time. And this was before Julie was, really famous, and before Elliot had done a lot of the movie scores he's well known for. But I caught them on the rise, and somehow I was lucky enough to be involved with that. And yeah, stuff of that complexity rarely makes it to the commercial world.
So what advice would you give to people who are looking to be connected with Broadway or write?
Well, let's do conducting Broadway first. I would say if you are a college student and you want to play or conduct for Broadway shows, what you want to do is keep track of the people who are older than you, a few years ahead of you or several years ahead of you, who have graduated from your school. Because people always love helping the people, younger alums of their alma maters. So I was helped by people ahead of me from Yale who had already graduated. They hired me to sub for them, and that's how I sort of got into the world. And the alumni network of your school is a very powerful thing, because like I said,
advise continuing past regular college and going on to advanced work?
Well, I don't think it does anything for you professionally necessarily. I mean, no one cared that I had a master's degree, but I think it did help me get better at playing piano. Let's hope. Also, I met my wife when I was in grad school, so I'm really glad about that. But if you're going to be a performing musician, no one really cares about your academic credentials. So I'm not sure I'd advise it. If you want to go on and perfect your instrument, then yes, by all means. If you want to be a Broadway pit musician, I don't think it's necessarily going to bring you to anyone's attention faster, except it's another school network of people that you can be in touch with. Like if you go to college at, say, Columbia, and then you go to grad school at Manhattan School of Music, say, you know, you're a clarinet player, now you've got the Columbia network and you've got the MSM network. So it's just more people to be in your network who can help you or give you a leg up. But the people you know, and particularly the people who went to your school are I find are very helpful. You know, when young kids come to me who are out of Yale, actually at this point, since now I teach there, I already know most of them. But, you know, I would always be inclined to do whatever I can to help them. I think that's a common feeling. As a composer, you've just got to start getting your stuff out there and inviting everybody in sight to see it. It's very easy to produce your own reading or workshop. You know, you've just got to rent a room. For a reading, you can probably get people to do it for very little money or even for free. You know, just get your talented friends to read your show. Invite the producers, you know, go through Theatrical Index and see who the producers are of shows that you think your show might be like. Invite artistic directors who run theaters. You know, keep a list going, keep a mailing list, and just let everybody know what you're doing. And a surprisingly large number of influential people will show up. A lot of these folks are looking for who's the next really talented team or songwriter. And, you know, you can get a lot of people to come and see you. I was shocked the first time Joanne and I did a reading of the first show we wrote together, Arabian Nights. You know, we put together a long mailing list. It was right before there was any such thing as email, so we couldn't do an email list, but we did a mailing, and I was kind of shocked by the people who showed up, you know, influential people. So get your stuff out there, invite people to come and see it, and eventually good things will start to happen.
And also go to see as many shows as you can see economically.
Well, yeah. It's great, certainly, if you're going to invite a producer to say, "Dear so-and-so, I just saw your fantastic show, fill in the blank, and thought it was absolutely wonderful. I thought you'd be interested to know that I'm having a reading next week." So, you know, go see shows because you'd like to see shows. Presumably that's why you're in the business. And seeing other people's shows helps you get better. But it's also, a producer, I think, is going to be flattered if you know something about them. So it's not just like a form letter, "Dear X, please come to see my musical next week." But "Dear Mr. such and such, I've really admired your work, and I've seen X, Y, and Z. I'm so impressed by your high artistic standards. I would love for you to be able to see some of my work." If you really personalize it, that's another good thing to do.
My daughter Jennifer, early in her life, she's now in Los Angeles, but she commuted from Connecticut to New York, and she was an executive secretary to high-up people at one point. The head of Radio City, but then they combined with Madison Square Garden, and
Right.
he was eliminated, and of course she was not needed. But she responded to Barry Weissler.
Huh.
And Barry, did you ever work for Barry?
Yeah, 2 or 3 times.
Chicago, yeah. Must have run into Chicago.
Falsettos and Wonderful Town. The Weisslers were producers on both of those.
Okay. So he asked her, you know, background, and he was impressed that you know, she had been in good positions. And he said, "You do know." Now, I took her to a lot of shows, but she was not that knowledgeable about producing them.
Mhm.
So he said, "You do know who I am, don't you?" And she said, "No." He said, "Well, then you can't work for the Weisslers."
Really?
Yes.
Wow, that's a very pertinent anecdote. Yes, in that case, not only right. So they are flattered when you know something about them, and in that case, they are unwelcoming if you don't know anything about
So
them.
I've seen every production you've done, Mr. Weissler.
Right, exactly. That's what you want to say. And hope he doesn't start quizzing you.
Right. Well, then, I thank you very much for giving us this advice and wonderful stories. And
thanks, Bruce. It was a pleasure to see you, and thanks for inviting me.
good. I thank you very much.
Good. Have a good one.